Escaping the shadow, when blood ties become chains. Growing up, I always knew my brother, Ethan, was the favorite. It wasn't a bitter observation, simply a statement of fact. My parents made it abundantly clear, time and again, that he was the golden child. He could do no wrong. He was the source of all their pride. As for me, I was just there, the afterthought, the backup plan. When we were kids, it didn't bother me too much. Sure, Ethan got the latest gadgets while I received his hand-me-downs. And yes, my parents raved about his every accomplishment while barely acknowledging mine. But I convinced myself it didn't matter. Then came Ethan's wedding. He was marrying someone my parents adored, someone from a wealthy, well-connected family. My parents treated the affair like the social event of the century. The preparations started almost a year in advance. The venue? A stunning mansion with sprawling gardens. The guest list? Hundreds of people, some of whom Ethan barely knew, but my parents insisted were essential. The honeymoon? An extravagant, all-expenses-paid trip around the world. Nothing was too much for Ethan. Only the best would do. You deserve a fairy tale. My mother gushed, watching as he finalized plans for his bachelor party. The entire family was consumed by the planning. Every conversation, every phone call, every weekend was dedicated to selecting caterers, choosing music, or finalizing guest accommodations. My parents footed every bill without hesitation. I stood on the sidelines, watching all unfold. When the big day arrived, it was like something out of a movie, a lavish ceremony, a celebrity DJ, an after-party that stretched into dawn. My parents radiated pride throughout the entire event. Then, less than a year later, I got engaged. I was excited, nervous, and above all, hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this would be different. Maybe, this time, they'd show even a fraction of the enthusiasm they had for Ethan. I sat my parents down, took a deep breath, and announced, "Liam and I are getting married." My mother blinked. "Oh, just oh." My father didn't even look up from his tablet. Hesitantly, I added, "We're planning a small ceremony at City Hall. Nothing big, just something simple and meaningful." That's when my mother let out a small, amused scoff. "City Hall?" she repeated, as if I'd announced we were eloping in a back alley. My father chuckled. "Well, I guess that's fitting for you." My stomach dropped. What's that supposed to mean? My mother waved a dismissive hand. "You're not really the type for a grand celebration. That's more your brother's style." More my brother's style. Just like everything else. I forced a smile. "Right? Well, we're really happy with our choice." "That's nice, dear," my mother said, already checking her phone. "Anything else?" That was it. No excitement, no questions, no offers to help, no congratulations, just indifference. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "No, that's all." I should have expected it. I should have known. But as I left that house, I made a decision that, days later, would throw my parents into a panic. My wedding day was quiet. No grand venues, no extravagant decorations, no crowd of guests with flashing cameras. Just Liam and I, standing hand in hand at City Hall, exchanging vows in front of a justice of the peace. And you know what? It was perfect. I didn't need a massive ballroom or designer clothes to feel special. When Liam looked at me and said, "I promise to love you always," I knew this was exactly where I was meant to be. Afterward, we had a small lunch at our favorite cafe with a few close friends. They cheered for us, toasted to our happiness, and made us feel like the luckiest people in the world. The only thing missing? My parents. I had texted them the night before, giving them one last opportunity. "We're getting married tomorrow at 11 a.m. at City Hall. You're welcome to come." The response? Utter silence. I woke up the next morning hoping, just hoping, that they might surprise me, that I'd see them waiting for me outside City Hall, ready to at least feign some interest. But they never showed. And that was the moment I truly realized I was done. A week later, I received a text from my mom. "Hope the wedding was nice." That was it. No, how was it? "No congratulations." No, we wish we could have been there. Just a generic, hollow message. I didn't even bother replying. Liam and I moved on with our lives. We began planning our future, discussing where we wanted to live, what we wanted to do next. It felt like a fresh start, one where I no longer had to seek approval from people who would never give it to me. Then, one day, my phone started ringing. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Hello. His voice was sharp, urgent. Where are you? I frowned. What? Your mother and I have been trying to reach you for days. You're not answering your texts. You're not calling back. I've been busy, I said flatly. Silence filled the other end of the line. Then, in a much softer tone, he said, Come back home. We need to talk. I almost laughed. Now, they wanted to talk. I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the phone tightly. What? Because we're your family, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me harden. No, I said, my voice firm. You were never my family. Not really. And then I hung up. Seconds later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Please, just come back, Mom texted. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty ignoring them. I had spent too many years waiting for them to love me the way they loved Ethan. But I wasn't waiting anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more chasing, no more trying, no more hoping. I had spent years convincing myself that if I was patient enough, if I was good enough, one day my parents would see me. But now I saw myself, and that was enough. Or so I thought, because my parents weren't done with me yet. A few days later, Liam and I were sitting in our cozy apartment, enjoying takeout on the couch, when there was a loud, rapid knocking at the door. I frowned. We weren't expecting anyone. Liam got up first, peering through the peephole. His expression darkened. It's your parents. My stomach tightened. For a moment, I considered not answering, letting them knock and knock until they gave up. But I knew my parents. They didn't just give up. So I took a deep breath and opened the door. My mother stood there, arms crossed, looking both furious and exasperated. My father was behind her, his lips pressed into a tight line. Finally, my mother said, pushing past me into the apartment. Do you know how worried we've been? I stared at her, then at my father, who followed her inside without an invitation. Worry, I repeated. You ignored my wedding, didn't respond to my messages for days. And now you're showing up at my door pretending to care. My mother scoffed. Don't be dramatic. We didn't ignore you. You didn't come. My voice was eerily calm. You didn't even say congratulations. You treated my wedding like it didn't matter, like I don't matter. She rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, it was a city hall wedding. What did you expect? A standing ovation. Liam took a step closer, his jaw tightening, but I placed a hand on his arm. I exhaled slowly. I expected something, but I guess that was my mistake. My father, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. This is getting ridiculous, he said. You're acting like we did something horrible. I let out a cold laugh. You did do something horrible. You spent a fortune on my brother's wedding and treated mine like an afterthought. You've always treated me like an afterthought. My mother huffed. Your brother's wedding was different. He what? I cut her off. He's more important, more worthy of love. Silence. And that silence told me everything. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, we're here because we don't want to lose you. You're still our daughter. I shook my head. No, I was just a backup option, a placeholder. And now that I'm finally done playing that role, now you want to talk. Neither of them responded. I took a deep breath. I'm not coming back, and I don't want to talk to either of you anymore. My mother's face twisted with anger. You're being selfish. I smiled. For once? Yeah, I am. And with that, I walked to the door, holding it open. They stared at me for a long moment, waiting for me to cave, waiting for me to beg like I used to. But I didn't. Eventually, my mother let out a frustrated sigh and stormed past me. My father followed, pausing only briefly at the door. This is your choice, he said quietly. I met his gaze. It is. Then I shut the door. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still resting on the door handle, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. Liam placed a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I turned to him, and to my surprise, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a forced one, a real, genuine smile. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Because for once, I hadn't given in. I hadn't let them twist my emotions, hadn't let them manipulate me into feeling guilty. I chose myself, and that was a choice I was going to keep making. The silence from my parents was deafening at first. No texts, no calls, no desperate attempts to reel me back in. Initially, I thought maybe, just maybe, they finally understood, that they realized they couldn't treat me like an afterthought anymore. But I should have known better, because 3 weeks later, my brother called. I stare at my phone screen, his name flashing across it. I hadn't spoken to him since before my wedding. Liam glanced over. "You don't have to answer." I hesitated, then with a sigh, I picked up. "Hello." "Oh my God," my brother said immediately. "Mom is losing her mind over this. She's been crying for days. She keeps saying she just wanted the best for you, and that you overreacted." I let out a slow breath. "I didn't overreact." He groaned. "You know how she is. She doesn't think before she speaks, but she loves you. She just—" I cut him off. "Did she send you to call me?" Silence. Then, quietly, he said, "She asked me to talk to you, to make you see reason." I almost laughed. "See reason? You mean apologize to her? I mean fix this," he said, exasperated. "She and Dad don't want to lose you. They were just upset that you got married so suddenly. They thought you'd wait for a real wedding." I felt a wave of exhaustion crash over me. "You mean, like your wedding?" I asked. "The one they spent thousands on? The one they wouldn't stop bragging about?" He hesitated. "It's not my fault they did that. I never said it was." I swallowed hard. "But do you know what it was like for me? Watching them pour everything into you while I got nothing." He was quiet. I sighed. "Look, I'm not angry at you, but I'm done begging them to care about me the way they care about you." "They do care about you," he said softly. "They just show it differently." I let out a humorless chuckle. "If that's what you want to believe, fine. But I'm not coming back. Not this time." There was a long silence. Then, finally, he sighed. "Okay." And just like that, the call ended. I thought that would be the last of it. But a few days later, my mother texted me again. "Your father is sick. He wants to see you." I stared at the message, my heart pounding, because I knew my mother, and I knew exactly what kind of game she was playing. I sat there staring at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Liam, sitting next to me, noticed my expression. "What is it?" I turned the phone toward him. His eyes scanned the message, and immediately he frowned. "Do you believe her?" That was the problem. I wanted to believe her. Because no matter what they'd done, no matter how much they'd hurt me, the idea of my father being sick, truly sick, sent a wave of panic crashing over me. What if I ignored it? And something really was wrong? What if I regretted this for the rest of my life? "She's never said anything like this before," I murmured. Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it, but it just feels convenient, doesn't it? The second you start standing your ground, suddenly there's a family emergency." I knew he had a point, but the fear still lingered. Finally, I exhaled sharply and typed out a response. "Me, what's wrong with him?" A minute passed, then two. Then my phone buzzed again. "Mom, he's just not feeling well. You should come home." I froze. Liam peered over my shoulder. "That's vague." I gritted my teeth. If it were really serious, she'd say what it was. She'd be panicking. She'd be begging, not just vaguely telling me to come home. I looked at Liam, anger slowly replacing my worry. "She's lying." He nodded. "Yes, she is." A deep, simmering rage built in my chest. They had no limits, no shame, no hesitation in manipulating me if it meant getting what they wanted. But this time, it wasn't going to work. So I texted back. "Me, if he's actually sick, take him to a doctor. But if this is just another manipulation tactic, I'm done. For good." This time, there was no immediate reply. Minutes passed, then an hour, then a day. And, just as I suspected, silence. Days later, my brother texted me. "Mom's furious. She says you accused her of lying." I scoffed at my screen. I replied, "That's because she was lying." Brother texted, "Dad's fine, by the way. Not sick at all." And there it was. Cold, hard proof that they would do anything to get me back under their control. I should have been hurt. I should have been devastated. But instead, I just felt done. I stared at my brother's message for a moment, then typed my final response. "Tell Mom she finally got what she wanted. She doesn't have to worry about me being in her life anymore." Then I blocked their numbers. All of them. Because I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me, manipulate me, or dragged me back into their toxic cycle. I was finally free. And this time, I wasn't looking back. It's hard to imagine how a parent could go so far as to lie about a serious illness just to manipulate their own child. But in the end, Opie saw right through it and chose themselves, something their family clearly never did. Was cutting them off the right move? It's tough, but after years of being treated as an afterthought, Opie finally set a boundary and stuck to it. And honestly, that takes strength. What do you think? Did Opie handle it the right way? Or should they have given their family only one last chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you think Opie made the right call, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.